Hey there, Diamond here. We're here with Cody, another Datadog director, right? Director of engineering, is that right?
Yeah, senior director actually, as of
Senior
this
director.
quarter. Yeah.
Oh man, mogging me. Is that what they say? I think so. We got a senior director of engineering here who's been working on some really cool stuff, especially with all the coding agents that are out there. We're going to be talking a little bit about what you call Pup, which is there to give a CLI to Datadog to agents, built for agents, not built for humans.
Yep.
Let's jump into it. Can you tell me a little bit about why you built this and how you came to this conclusion that we needed this?
Yeah, actually, I originally built Pup for my own purpose. And in fact, it started as a generic Claude skill. We use Claude here at Datadog. And I just wrote a skill that used our Open API SDKs and the TypeScript SDK. And I said, hey, look, Claude, these things exist. Let's write a skill for myself. Because what I needed to do internally, I manage all of our software delivery lifecycle here at Datadog, is like, I need some more metrics. Help me find these metrics. Help me keep track and make sure like our on-call is good, our monitors are in good shape, all this kind of stuff. And it started off that way. And then what I quickly noticed was Claude just started writing its own set of massagery across their APIs. They are different for a number of reasons over the years. And, think of things like timestamps. They might be in epoch seconds. They might be in epoch milliseconds. They might be in epoch nanoseconds. Some are in RFC 339 style. Sorry, 3339 style. And some aren't. So I did notice it started doing that. At a certain point, I just kind of leaned in heavily of like, all right, it's solving what I need to do locally. But I took it back a second over a weekend. And I was like, at what point do I just need an MCP, which we have an MCP brought it here at Datadog, but not a large feature set. And I was using features outside of that feature set. And so then I kind of like said, hey, actually, this is a great time again to pull it out into a CLI built for agents at the start, not for humans. And so that's where Pup originally started. I was like, all right, let's just fork this out. I originally made it Go because the strong typing seemed to help Claude quite a bit. Over TypeScript was good. It was just slower. I did notice it did speed up in Go, and I'm a backend engineer by heart, so Go was my language of choice. So that's where it started. That's how Pup started, but with the key premise of agents first, human second. And human second was because I'm trying to debug Pup while it's building it, just kind of visually check where it's going. So that's how it started.
That's fair. So it's more of a collaborative tool sometimes
Yeah,
than just a tool made for agents.
yeah.
Um, so tell me a little bit more. You touched on the MCP stuff. Where do you kind of see CLIs fitting with MCP servers, fitting with skills, and anything else that's coming out in the near future as we keep trying to figure out what's going on?
I think it's kind of like, choose your own path in many ways. It is like that with the software engineering in general. Maybe your company says, hey, MCPs are the way to do things. Maybe it provides the additional access restrictions that you want. Um, I'm kind of leaning towards personally that CLIs are probably the initial way to go, at least today, because it's then gets you a more breadth of tools. And my best anecdote for this is when using Claude, it knows how to use the GitHub tool that you have locally very
Hmm.
well, like insanely well. And it knows how to use Git insanely well. And so this was kind of the experiment of like, well, if the tool is pretty well documented and obvious, I wonder how well it'll do with Pup. And it turned out to be insanely easy for Claude to figure it out with some key tricks, which I'll share later. But like the CLIs, it tends to be really well. And I think in MCP, I also noticed we used a lot of context window unless you scope down what it can use. And so unless I wanted to use one of the bigger context window things, like I was then trading off like spend all the budget in context windows and maybe have a breadth of tools or like let it fill it up as necessary, which is what the CLI approach tends to accomplish, it looks like.
That's fair. And before we jump to a demo, so far, have you been trying it a lot with local like Claude agents that are running
Yeah.
codecs, anything like that? Have you tried it yet with like running a remote agent anywhere that's using this?
I have not tried it yet with like the Datadog bits dev agent. It is interesting. I think someone shared it. Actually, Ryan McLean actually shared using the pup WASM build inside of a static app, which is actually kind of neat. Um, and so, but I use it personally with Claude almost
Mhm.
predominantly for when I'm actually doing stuff. I will use it locally, directly. If I'm like doing some hand testing, maybe telling Claude like, oh, okay, let's fix this. It's not quite what I wanted. But comically, when I test it locally, I tend to test it in the agent mode more so than the human mode.
Mhm.
And so like I don't personally test a lot of the tabular output for like results because it's not really helpful for me, with the exception of a new command, which I can give you a sneak preview of maybe later.
All right, sounds cool. Let's demo it then.
All right, so this is Pup. There's two modes I'll share about right here, real quick. And so there's the dev mode, which is the bottom. This is like the human mode, is what you would say. So the quick intro here is like, I'm going to use the latest release, which is Pup 25. If you just do the quick normal like help command, you'll see a bunch of commands that pop in here. This has quite a bit of our product coverage, but not complete. That's still a to do on things. But you have a nice like list of all the things you can do. So you can do simple things like pup log search, and I'm just going to search everything from the last 5 minutes. And I'm going to use the DD staging org so we don't share anything of value here. And so what you can get is like the nice JSON output.
Mhm.
You could do a tabular output form if you wanted to, but there's this kind of mode. And so there's a whole bunch of commands in there, right? You could go through like looking up monitors, certain metrics. There's even a cool feature for status pages. We're going to do the status pages. So this is straight
Very
from
nice.
Updog. Yeah, it's just straight from Updog. It takes all the results. It looks the provider if they're having an outage or they're operational right now. It gives you a nice little ASCII, status page on it as well. And so it's kind of unique. You can kind of get that kind of information if you wanted to. And so there's a whole bunch in here to discover its wealth. Now, when I look at Pup and I say Pup was really designed for agents, it actually uses the environment variables that all these set to figure this out. The code's real simple. The presence of these environment variables dictates the fact that it's probably an agent. There's another flag you can say like pup has a dash dash agent flag that you can force this on. That is another option, but I just generally use a handy flag that I made. And so you'll notice that now pup has a completely different output. Structured text, it's just JSON. But what it starts to do is it starts to list all the commands that exist, helpful keywords in here. And so what I'm going to do is pipe this through JQ to give you an idea of things that can exist in here. So like patterns and anti-patterns on how to use pup. This includes things like, hey, we're going to copy best practices actually. So we'll do best practices. Always specify from where you're doing time. And so these are helpful cues for your agent to kind of figure things that are going out. You can use limit to control the result size so it's not too big. So this helps it control context window usage. Tags, durations are always in nanoseconds for certain things. And these could be adjusted on the fly as well.
And how
It
do you
also
give this
has,
to Claude right now? So you would just say, "Hey, this is a tool that's available to you,"
yeah.
and it should.
So yeah, so what I've typically done in each session, I actually have a skill installed, but you can use it this way too until it becomes popular and just like, Claude and the tools know about it.
Mhm.
Um, so like I say, there's a CLI tool called Pup installed, use Pup to help discover what it offers. That's it.
Perfect.
It's a simple
Yep.
prompt, right? And so like the result of this is like, it figures out everything that's in here. And you could also just like in your prompt say, I'm trying to figure out what monitors. There's a tool called Pup and it'll go figure it out automatically. So I've always had general success about this. Um, and so again, I can also encode, oops, not best practices, but query syntax. Um, and you can figure out like, oh, hey, like if you've ever used Datadog, we have a bunch of different query syntax in different products. This kind of helps seed like Claude or your agent as well. So that's kind of the gist of it, of what help does. Now, then it gets into the commands, which is all of the help text that you saw, and including the subcommands and sub commands and etc. And it helps it figure out what flags exist to pass to pup. And this similarly exists in GitHub. If you just kind of keep parsing help, 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 help for each command. The only reason I did this differently is like that's a lot of round trips between
Mhm.
your session. And so doing it all up front can actually build it. The caveat is you do use more context. But right now pump's not too huge, so it's fairly small itself. Now, we may need to iterate in a similar fashion to like the MCP toolset fashion in the future, but I think that's up for discovery as we go.
Very cool. So this is currently in the beta preview-ish stage right now on
Yeah.
Datadog Labs GitHub repo. Is that right? GitHub org.
Yeah, it's there right now. There's been quite a few outside contributors too, fixing, finding things, requesting features. We have a couple active discussions. One of those is, you notice I'm on the vet command feature branch,
Mhm.
and that's one of those things. It is quite detailed, but if I come through here, let's see, if I do vet against our DD staging org, it's actually going to query a bunch of monitors, a bunch of checks. These checks kind of include like, maybe there's some pager burden going on here, like these ones that are not active or like constantly paging. There's like a fast re-notify interval. So like less than, 60 minutes, they're constantly like, bothering somebody about something and they're still active. There's even like details around like, hey, maybe these just like have poor, well, it's quite a few in this org, no recovery threshold. So potentially a misconfiguration. If we kind of keep going up, you'll see like untagged monitors, completely muted and forgotten monitors, maybe something to look at. And so you're like naturally this could extend to like other types of checks like, okay, is this the best use of our time? Is this the best use of like a particular Datadog resource? And so you can kind of like focus on what's critical, maybe what's warning, and what else is maybe of like, nice to have.
It is interesting. I mean, it starts to think about what is a tool for an agent to like Claude to make decisions itself versus how do you encode some of that domain knowledge?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what this was trying to address of like we could give Claude the general access, and I've done that before, and it's done a decent job at it sometimes, not always. And so starting to encode some of those behaviors that we know the patterns are makes the tool output a little more deterministic, which should give Claude a better idea like how to summarize or project new actions.
Very cool. So what do you think is next here? Like what's your dream for where Pup goes?
My dream right now is like get more product coverage, frankly speaking. There's a whole bit of like how do we even get all the like OAuth support for it. So like it's funny, Pup actually kind of spurred off like getting more OAuth support, which if you don't know, Datadog, you can interact with, kind of permanent API app keys, which give you basically access to the kingdom for what they're scoped for, or more temporary tokens. And so there's kind of a dual mode, more coverage, tighter controls around security that also limit what your Claude cannot do. Because I think a lot of people at some point will start letting Claude run in dangerously do whatever you want mode. And so the last thing you want to do is like, go much delete a bunch of useful monitors, right? And so, start to think about like, how do we give it the right amount of scope, which the person is comfortable with to do more automation, versus enough to do whatever it needs as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that I would also want my hopefully expert at Datadog Claude to be able to run off and fix things and clean them up, but within reason, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a within reason. I think it might be interesting, in longer term of like, what is everybody's favorite thing to look at is like how much does Datadog cost? It's like, well, here's a great tool to help you understand where maybe you're spending some extra money and is it worth it? Like, are these metrics being used at all? Is a good question. Or the inverse question of you're reporting this metric, do you need a monitor on it?
Yeah, completely reasonable. Kind of the solutions architect in a box here. Cool. Seeing like an agent. Thank you so much for sharing with us. It's a pretty cool project. I can't wait to see where it goes. And I'll put a link down for anyone to check it out as well.